Now, I already said that I think we could very realistically be headed towards Great Depression 2.0, or potentially even the Greatest Depression. Looking at the world stage today versus late 20s, early 30s, there's a lot of eerie similarities between the two. But instead of just panicking over that or being consumed by fear or anything of the like, how about we take the wisdom of those who survived the Great Depression and learn how you and I, here in 2025, can take that wisdom from those who went before us and apply it to our modern day and age to help us here with the Great Depression 2.0. Hey friends, I'm Heidi, the Heavenly Minded Homemaker. It is my goal to encourage and equip you to live a life of peace, of purpose, and abundance. I believe in homegrown revival, and today's video is another step down that narrow path. So before we get into it, be sure to hit that like button and say hello to Tony Macaroni.
This weather's not my home, I'm just a passing through. My praises are laid on some weary on the blue.
So I think it's been interesting, but lately kind of just keeping an eye on the world and the things that are going on and all of the things that are happening. It just, that's a full-time job in and of itself. There's so much here lately. And for those of us who are believers, who are in God's word each and every day, things are making a lot of sense, okay? So there is that piece, which I appreciate. Something else that I've been doing a lot lately is I've been trying to make it a habit to spend more time just reading. And that's something that I love doing, but life gets busy and for some reason I just never can seem to fit it in. So I've been trying to be more diligent about time to just pause and be present and go to a good book. And I've been reading a lot of books about the Great Depression, and not just, about why stuff happened or what happened or, different people's takes, but reading things like real people who survived the Great Depression from different angles, different circumstances, their accounts of what happened. And I think it's interesting. I remember stories from my great-grandparents growing up and even things that they still did that I remember were kind of weird when we were a kid because we didn't do that at home, but we always did that when we were at my great-grandparents' house because I spent time with two sets of my great-grandparents regularly as a child. And it was always because, well, that's what they did during the Depression. So that's what, they continue to do. And we still do that when we're here with them. Like, that's just what it is. Even things that my grandparents did because they had grown up with parents who got through by the skin of their teeth the Great Depression and just things that were instilled in them. And so there's a lot of things like that were just kind of normal. And I remember the stories and remember different things that were happening. And I think it's really, really interesting. And so then reading these books, kind of just putting these pieces together. And so as I'm reading, I found these 21 things that we see pretty consistently from really any of their aspects of what was going on, what was happening. And while it might not be exactly the same today, I think there's a lot of wisdom in what they did to get through, to survive, to even begin to thrive in any capacity. And I think that we can take that and kind of put it through the lens of 2025 to see what you and I can start doing, as I honestly believe Great Depression 2.0 is right around the corner, if not here already. Now, of course, this list isn't going to be completely comprehensive, so you guys will have to let me know down in the comments below. I think it's so amazing here that we can connect like this. What were stories that you heard from your grandparents, your great-grandparents, right? What are things you're doing and you're applying here in 2025 to help you prepare for what's to come? There's a lot of doomsday news out there talking about how store shelves are going to go bare and mass layoffs are coming and, all these other things that, again, not to spread panic or fear, but to say there are realities here that we need to be wise to address. And so what are you doing, right? Leave me a comment. Let me know. The first area, of course, we have to look at just frugality and resourcefulness. If you look at the average, person in the late 20s, early 30s versus late 2020s, right? The resourcefulness and frugality, night and day difference. I'm even planning to do a video here soon just talking about more frugal ways that our family tries to live and shop and eat and all of those things, because while it might feel like it's common sense to you and I, it's not common sense to everyone anymore today. And so I think that it is important. Things like repurposing and repairing. That was the first line of defense for the average person back in 1930, right? Was to reuse, was to repurpose. You didn't just go buy something new, right? That wasn't the norm. You fixed what you had as long as you could, and then it just found itself a new purpose if you couldn't fix it to keep doing its original purpose any longer. And so I think that's really, really important to remember, that there was a lot of that going on all the time in every area. So now think of yourself. How many things have you bought new, just replaced, versus repurposing, right? Fixing it up, finding some way to either repair it or reuse it versus just going and getting a new one. Home gardening. It was the norm up until just a few decades ago that every family had a home garden. Our family eats a mainly carnivore diet, and even still, we are building a home garden. There are still some things, right? Some fresh things that we use, and if we can grow it ourselves, game changer. We have had blackberries growing on our property for years now, and we keep saying how, man, we should really do something with this versus it just being stuff that we snack on and that our chickens love to eat, even our dogs eat them. Maybe we should pick these and sell these. What are things in your home garden that you can be growing to reduce the costs of your grocery bill? And then I want to add in foraging and hunting. This is another key piece. Again, I came from family that barely survived through the Great Depression. I mean, they came from Oklahoma to California. They had so much that they, were faced with. My family hunted my whole life, and it was a family affair. Everybody came together when they came back in from their big hunting trip so that we could process the meat and set it all up and divvy it out to the family. It was like a whole thing that would happen every single fall. I live out here in Western North Carolina now, and you do see, we live out in the country, and hunting is still a big thing. Fishing is still a big thing, but that's not really the case largely across the board anymore. Going out and foraging. On our property, we have stuff all over the place that is edible, that is medicinal. There's so many things that we can go out and forage. Now, we don't have to do it very often because it's just easier to pop by Walmart and pick up whatever we need. But these types of skills are going to be really, really important as times continue to get leaner and leaner and leaner. Now, the second area that I think we see consistently with the Great Depression 1.0 is mutual aid and community support. And I think the fact that this is so lacking today, getting ready to go into Great Depression 2.0, this is going to be a big one. And so this is why I think it's important to discuss, because you and I can start making a change in this area today. So whether Great Depression 2.0 is on its way, maybe it takes a while, maybe we're already smack dab in it, doing these things are going to start making a profound impact. When we went through Hurricane Helene last fall, these were the things that made the difference. It wasn't government, it was, right? It wasn't any, it wasn't FEMA, it wasn't Red Cross, it wasn't any of those things. It was these things here. Now, 3 things that they had going into the Great Depression 1.0, soup kitchens and bread lines. Obviously, those were huge. The fact that organizations, churches, local governments, things like that were coming together and setting up soup kitchens and bread lines, that was huge. That had never been done to that scale before here in America. That was really important. But I think now of the things that we have with food hubs and programs and things like that, maybe you've never looked into that before. Nearly every town out there today has churches, has local organizations that have some sort of food pantry that you can go and receive supplies from. And if you are in need, remember, we don't want to let our pride completely just take over. Sometimes we need help. And that's okay. It's okay to genuinely need help and receive assistance, right? People love being able to give and to help where they can. And so sometimes that means that you might be on the side to receive that help. Don't let your pride get in your way. If you are really struggling and you need the aid of food pantries, there's no shame in that if you genuinely need it, right? If you are doing all that you can do and it's still not enough, which I think most of us today are going, yep, you do have have resources. And I know for us, we have some really great programs around us. My daughter did some stuff working in different things, and we got to, volunteer and go and learn and do different things. And it was so great to see these community boxes where even farmers bring extra and they put it together and they pass it out. And I mean, there's so many, again, great resources out there if you start looking. And I think that we're going to need to start seeing more things like this coming together, especially in the years to come. The next would be neighborly support. Now, when we look back to the 30s, knowing your neighbor, being connected, bringing in others, right? There's countless stories you can read of everybody kind of congregating in one spot and kind of making something and sharing it and divvying it out. Somebody who had being able to feed that one who didn't, that just connection with neighbors. So incredibly important, and something that I think most of us are not seeing in our neighborhoods today. We've lived in this house for 10 years this summer, which is the longest we've lived anywhere. We moved 16 times in less than 11 years over 6 different states. So trust me, I know what it's like to not feel very secure in your neighborhood. Where we live here, the homes are really spread out. We don't really have neighbors next to us. Everybody's kind of spread out on plots of land. We met a neighbor across the street, which we saw the driveway. We didn't actually even know there was a house back there. We thought it was just this other guy's driveway maybe or something. I met one of my neighbors the other day. It was the first time I have met an actual neighbor here and had a good interaction. And so it was really, really neat. And it was oh wow, this is so great. It's nice to meet you. If you need anything, we're here, and vice versa. It was fantastic. How can you start investing in getting to know your neighbors, right? Maybe you have not gotten off on the right foot, but you can be that person to break the ice and to smile and, hey, have a great day, you know what I mean? And start doing stuff. Maybe you see them out struggling with something and you go over and lend a hand, right? There's many different things that we could do to try to start bridging that gap where the possibility, exists. But neighborly support was a huge key piece in the Great Depression. We saw it here with Hurricane Helene when stuff got bad. People really started jumping in to help one another. And I have a feeling that when Great Depression 2.0 really kicks in, we're going to start seeing that as well. Now, the next one would really be just those religious and even, ethnic networks. We really saw this with the Great Depression. America was such a melting pot, and you saw so many different nationalities, really banding together and coming together and doing things. I don't know if that will necessarily be the case this time, but the reliance upon churches and the aid that comes from that, I think for any of us as Christians, we're going to go into this seeing it as a just massive mission field of where we can go out and speak truth. We live in a world that is so uncertain. Nobody knows. I mean, people can't figure out what gender they are anymore, let alone to know what is truth, considering it comes from the Lord and the Lord alone. And we only know truth when we know God's word. And so I think that there's going to be a lot of that starts to come out where people start going, I need to figure this out. I need to know what's going on. We all have that Jesus-shaped hole in our heart, for lack of better terms, where we're hungry, we're searching, we want meaning, we want purpose, we want direction. And I think we're going to see more and more of that. And I really pray that the church will really awaken, align itself with Scripture, stop being so divided, and actually move forward to serve as it should. Now, the third group that I really noticed here were just the overall living arrangements that were very different from the 1930s to now. And something that we saw, people doing so often back, decades ago. And I mean, honestly, you've probably even seen this, and maybe you're even in a situation like this, is multi-generational households. Now, maybe you do this, maybe you've done this before. I think that, our houses have just gotten bigger, just to hold more stuff and less people, right? We've seen so many weird things over the past few decades that have continued to happen, but I love when we see multi-generational housing. I grew up with this being the norm in my family quite frequently. My husband thought it was so weird because his family did nothing like this. My family was always like this. We started doing this. We started caring for my mother-in-law and having her live with us, and, kind of just the differences of different people. And our homestead now, we've got a family, our family size here on the homestead is 14 people. So we've got kind of a whole mix of this going on. I love multi-generational living. And I think that we saw this back in the 1930s, and it really was a way to survive and care for one another and help one another. And I think we're going to start seeing more of this as we go on. I think that, the pendulum always swings, and we have swung so far on the other end, the other extreme, that it's only a matter of time before it starts to kind of come back. The next thing we saw with living arrangements were shanty towns, right? Hooverville, right? These little makeshift living situations that were not fantastic. Anybody who lives in an area that has a large, homeless population, you probably see these types of little pop-up camps everywhere. I think that more and more as we go into this, people searching for affordable housing is going to happen. And housing is out of control. I mean, the affordable housing problem that our nation is facing today is just bananas as it is. And so I think we're only going to start to see more and more things. You think of people doing tiny homes, people living in RVs. We're seeing many different alternative housing things really coming out, and, maybe they had some popularity or some whatever, but we're going to see more and more people literally doing them because you're not going to be able to afford to do anything else. And so it might not be shanty towns and Hoovervilles like it was in the 1930s, but I think we're going to have things that are very, very similar. I think they already exist, and I think they're only going to continue to grow as people are looking for alternate means of housing because they can't afford anything else. And I know, it's ridiculous. The third thing I think is we're going to start seeing it become a little more commonplace to rent out rooms, to find ways that you can make your housing situation a little more affordable. So if you have an extra room, you can, group kids together, right? You start doing these kind of creative things. Anybody who maybe is retired and has some open space, if it's not, kids or grandkids moving in with them, finding ways to make some money off of that. Those were things that you saw quite often during the first Great Depression. And I think we're going to start seeing more of that here now. And maybe that's for you, especially, maybe you can look if you and you've got someone else, friends going in on a house together or something like that, where you are sharing the responsibility or taking what you do have and leasing it out to someone else. I think we're going to start seeing more of those types of things. Now, the fourth area would be creative income sources. For any of us who are relying on one source of income, I think we're in a bad spot, right? If you are relying and you feel confident because you have your salary or you have, your job or whatever it is, I think we saw in 2008, how unreliable that was. I think we've seen many different times over the recent years how that's not really the best thing to do. But I think that, this is what they went through in 1930, obviously, and they went through it in mass layoffs. And I think we're only going to be seeing it here again. And so things like picking up odd jobs. I love talking about cottage industry. I love talking about different lines of income. Like I said, even us, we're looking at how many blackberries our land produces and going, you know what? I think it's time. I think it's time that we start packaging them. We start offering them fresh, wild berries from our land here that are seasonal, that are local, right? They're delicious, and that we could put out and potentially bring in a little extra income for a family. Looking for different ways that you can pick up some odd jobs. What is something you know how to do, right? What is something, a skill you have, some knowledge you have, resources you have? What are some odd jobs that you could pick up? I think there's a lot of different ways that we all could find a couple little extra things that we can do. We also saw, of course, back in the Great Depression, lots of street vending and hustling, just people out there, especially if you live more in a city area, you probably see this a lot. We're noticing even out here where we are, which is more rural, that street vendors and things like that are kind of popping up a little bit more out here. And I think it's rather interesting. I watched this guy, he owned a hot dog cart, and him just, talking about it. I've seen different people that they own, these little like food and snack carts and go to parks and popular areas and things. And it's kind of amazing the income that you can bring in from something like that. So I think something like that, even if it's, just baked items, it's crafts that you make, it's performances and things like that, I think that could be a neat area if you have one of those unique skill sets that you could kind of put yourself out there and potentially earn something from. And the other part that I think we really noticed when it came to creative income was back with the Great Depression 1.0. We saw the ways in which women contributed, right? Women didn't hold jobs like unfortunately many of us do today. It's a whole different topic. We won't get into it, but there were many ways that they brought in money. And I think that we can learn from that still here today. If you are, retired, you're a stay-at-home mom, whatever the case may be, it's not that you necessarily have to go out and get a job to start bringing in money as well. There are many things that you can do from home, again, cottage industry, that would really start to bring in an income. Learning how to sew, right? I think many people are going to start seeing value in fixing things rather than just replacing them, but they don't know how to do it. Do you know how to do it? Can you teach someone else? Can you offer that service up? Maybe that's something. Sewing isn't difficult, right? It isn't like it's so difficult I could never do it. There's a million videos online. You can learn to sew. I'm so thankful. I had a great aunt who taught me how to sew, and I love sewing. I don't get to do it as often as I would like to, but it is such a wonderful skill to know. And so maybe you can start doing that more often. You can offer your services, put a, Facebook ad out there. Hey, if you have clothing that needs to be fixed, I can fix it for you. I can teach you how to fix it, right? There's many different things you could do there. Maybe it's offering to do laundry service, right? Maybe there's just housekeeping and things like that some people would like some assistance with, especially if they could find somebody reliable, dependable, and affordable. And so I think that as women, there's a lot of really neat service-related things that we could look to, kind of looking at what women in the 1930s did, that we can do today that really could help us with some creative income sources. The next one was looking at, of course, can't talk about 1930s and the Great Depression, everything that went on without looking at the government and relief programs. And it was I've been fascinated. I've been watching like documentary after documentary, and it was so groundbreaking to see these programs coming in that had never been done, right? We had the New Deal programs with FDR that he was bringing in, and all of these fascinating things that happened. But then it's interesting. I've been fascinated by watching FDR and what he did and how he structured things. Even he was the first president to just completely skip over having the inauguration ball because he was like, no, we're just getting to work. It was fascinating to see the people that he was bringing in, the people he was surrounding himself with, and you kind of compare that to the current administration, and you're like, just interesting that you see similarities in things. You're looking at news coming out of our government here today, of changes to programs and new things that are coming out that are coming together to try to deal with the crises at hand. And so what the outcome will be, I don't know, right? I don't know what the future holds, but it is neat to see the programs that they had then and the programs that are kind of being put together today. And there's a lot of similarities in there. Some states and even local offices back during the 1930s, they started offering relief payments. I think that's interesting, as today we're seeing talk of, should the Doge start, sending citizens payments as they're finding all of this waste and saving money in different areas. There's, talks about new bills coming out to help us here in Western North Carolina rebuild after Hurricane Helene. Any of us who went through COVID, obviously, we saw the payments that came in for that. So there's lots of interesting things here that obviously were done during Great Depression 1.0. We've seen done in the years since, and I'm sure will be things that start to play a piece in the potential Great Depression 2.0 across the board there. And then just federal aid in general that was seen during the Great Depression with the Federal Emergency Relief Administration, and things that housing assistance, food assistance. I saw a news article, anybody who have school-age children, they have the Sunbucks program that's coming out where it's an offer of, it's like $10 a week, but some money to help with, providing some extra food income to children over the summer months, the children that are used to getting, free or reduced cost lunches in the public school system that will get some assistance, going throughout the summer as well. So we have lots of programs like that have really just grown, and I think we've learned a lot probably since 1930. Now, this one I want to do a whole video on. It'll be a different topic for a different day, but the cultural and psychological coping, because I am seeing, as I am watching these documentaries and reading these books about people who survived the Great Depression, and really this one is so important. There's so many key pieces here that really made a huge difference and a large impact when dealing with all of these other things we've talked about so far. And this is where we saw big changes with entertainment, cheap and free entertainment, right? That was all over the place. You think of, radio shows, you think of board games, community events and things that were going on. That was such a great thing for people to gather together. You probably have a lot of free entertainment around you. You didn't even realize it, right? We talked about this a little bit the other day about, reading books, just going out and going hiking, finding local community things that are going on, just playing together, being with family, not thinking that everything that's fun to do has to cost a bunch of money. It can be free too, or really, really cheap. And so finding ways that you can start to enjoy the things. Maybe you've been used to doing all these expensive, nice, fancy things, or you thought that was the only place to have fun was if you could afford those things. Not necessarily. I don't think so at all. But start looking for those free and cheap things that you can do, because that morale boost, that coming together, that building community, right, that we talked about, those are all really, really important pieces. Then, of course, hobbies and skills. Even the things that maybe they did because they, it was part of their creating some extra income, but knitting, woodworking, right? You think of the things that people used to do, the hobbies people had, they usually created something. They hobby homesteader, hobby baker, hobby knitter, hobby sewer, right? There's so many different things that you could do that does produce something. And so whether it's something that you can sell, or maybe it's just something that you can use, or you can share with someone, or you can provide to something, there are so many great uses for people that want to pick up these hobbies of old that most of us just don't see anymore, right? Like, I don't know, even if you have something like you just like playing video games. I don't get it. I'm not a video game person. There are ways that you can start a YouTube channel, right? Like, start something with that, so that way at least it's not just you wasting time and money. How can we look at our hobbies as something that can be a little more useful? That's my thought on it. And then, of course, just the optimism and resilience. When we go back to these stories, to these things, I was listening to the song Brother, Can You Spare a Dime the other day that was, comes out of all of this, and looking at those coming out of World War I and then going into the Great Depression, the bonus army, all of these different things. The optimism and resilience. And again, I did a video the other day talking about just the peace that your grandmother or great grandmother had that you and I probably don't have today. So instrumental in going through all of this. Let me share you the last points, and then I'll link that video for you. Migration and mobility. I told you my family was originally from Oklahoma. They ended up in California. They went through the Great Depression, the Dust Bowl, right? All of that stuff going on. They had to migrate. They had to go and seek work. They had to go and do something that maybe wasn't very comfortable. But in order to find a better life for their family, they had to make those harsh changes and those big decisions. And so you might be looking at everything and going, ugh. I hear from people all the time. They're like, oh, well, it must be nice for you. I live where it's the most expensive and blah, 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 blah. And I go, yeah, guess what? I used to too, okay? I come from Southern California. Our family left. And we left because we were looking for a better life for our family. Like I said, we have lived 16 places in under 11 years, spanning over 6 states. I know it's difficult, but sometimes when you're looking at what is best for your family, yourself, your whatever your situation is, it means you're gonna have to go somewhere else. And I don't say that lightly. I understand. Sometimes that's what it means. Maybe you did go somewhere else because you were pursuing the career, the whatever, and it's time to come back home, to move back out to the country where grandma and grandpa are, and be there where things don't cost as much, where you have more opportunity to become more self-sustainable and not rely so heavily upon this worldly system. It might be time to start having these conversations, and you might want to do it before it gets too bad. The 21st tip that I saw, the thing that I saw so often in all of these Great Depression stories and accounts and things like that, this is the fun one. Hopping freight trains. You saw some sketchy stuff that went down for them to move around and to find work. And I'm not recommending that, okay? I'm not saying go and start being a hobo and doing that. I think that just shows the point that when things got so desperate, people did whatever they could. So if we're going to learn from the wisdom of those who came before us, maybe we should start doing some of all of these other things up here before we hit the bottom of the barrel and we become so desperate. We need to be responsible. We need to take this seriously and start doing things that make us a little more self-sustainable each and every day. Building prepared pantries, right? Getting out of debt, radically changing our spending habits, finding by whatever means necessary, cheaper housing, get out of car payments, right? Like whatever it is that we're going through, how can we whittle down our excess to the best of our ability and start making wise decisions, being faithful stewards, trusting that the Lord above all is going to provide us our daily bread each and every day as we work unto His glory with everything that we have, so that we're not those desperate people at the bottom of the barrel. I want to be the wise steward who's investing, who is able to share, who is producing a crop that is bountiful, versus being the hobo on the train doing really sketchy things, trying to stay alive. We can learn so much from those who came before us. Wouldn't it make sense that we start doing that we start applying these things today, looking at what they did to survive? And how does that translate in 2025 to help us here and for the time to come get through all of this chaos. And if you are wanting to find that peace, that purpose, that just stability that your grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents most likely had, even going through difficult seasons, I highly recommend you come and join me for this conversation right up here, as really just looking at these things has been something that has been so heavy on my heart lately, and I pray that it can truly bless you here today. I'll see you right over in that video. Bye, friends.